Communication is not an easy thing. That's one of the things that I find the longer I live. Communication isn't a science. Communication's an art. And, you know, God's created us all very differently. Men and women, our brains literally work different. That is scientific fact. They work different. With that, we have different personalities. We have different experiences. We view things differently. And so communication isn't easy. You know, sometimes we'd like to think that we can just take a word and somebody use this word and we're going to go to the definition and we're going to know exactly what they said. You know, when it comes to biblical studies, for instance, you know, people are big into studying the original languages that things were written in. And that's good stuff. But hear this. Knowing the exact definition of a word is not necessarily going to show you exactly what the person meant. Have you ever tried to express something and you're like trying to find the words, but you can't quite do it? Or you know the person that you're talking to and you're trying to express it in a way that you know that they will get it. Because you understand that they have a different view and all this stuff. And one of the things that we've run into recently in the last 20 or 30 years with the progress of communication is that now with the invention of the internet and cell phones and social media and texting, we're doing all this communicating through just typing things out. And I've found that I've had to learn how to communicate in ways that I wasn't used to growing up. Because there's something very different about reading a text from someone or reading a post as opposed to being in their presence. And I've found that many times I have misunderstood someone or have been misunderstood. Because I just, you know, I'm typing it out fast. You know, I'm putting it out there. And there have been times when I've received something and I read it and I'm like, I start to get mad. I'm like, what? And then I pause and I'm like, wait a minute. I know this person. I know their heart. I really don't think that they're saying what I think they're saying. Why am I saying all this? Because we've been given the Word of God in order to know God. That's why we've been given this. But here's what you need to know. If you don't know God, this Word is not going to make sense to you and you are going to misinterpret it. There's something very different about knowing God and knowing about God. I mean, imagine for a second. What if, just pretend that you don't have personal contact with anyone. All you have is their social media presence. Can you imagine the views that you would have of people and how radically different they would be than the view that you have of them doing life with them? It would be radically different. Well, one of the things that Jesus ran into that we're going to look at this morning, and something that we run into constantly today, is he ran into people who were studying the Word like crazy. But here's what they were doing. They were trying to know about God rather than trying to know God. And because they were not trying to know God, you know what they did? They missed God in physical form right in front of them. Like these religious people who studied the Word every single day. They talked about it. They went to school. They were all about it. God shows up and they say, that's not Him. How is that possible? I'm telling you, that's why I go back to the texting and the social media. It's so easy to do. It's so easy to read something and we totally interpret something that is completely out of their mind, that's different than what they're trying to say. And the only way to really know what they're communicating is to spend time with them, to get to know them. And that's when we really begin to know their heart. You see, again, it's good to know some of the original languages and to know some of those definitions. I mean, what Stephanie shared with us this morning, wasn't that so good to just hear about praise and to hear all the different aspects about praise? That stuff is so good. But when it comes to knowing the heart of God, hear this, it's not enough. It's not enough. How are you going to know the heart of God? The way that you know the heart of God is that you walk with Him. You walk with Him. And as you walk with Him, you look at His Word continually and you spend time in His Word. And what's going to happen is God's going to speak to your heart and He's going to guide you. But if you simply go to the Word and you just try to know about Him and then you live your life the way that you want to, it is not going to work. You are going to completely misinterpret who God is. One of our kids this week was asking us about something, and they're like, should I do this or should I not? You know, I can't decide. And it wasn't a right or wrong thing. It was just a matter of, is this something that I want to do, that I want to commit myself to? And what we both said is, ask the Lord. Well, I don't hear God. I mean, what good is that? I want to know what you think. And we said, it doesn't matter what we think. It matters what God thinks. And then we explained, you're not listening for an audible voice. God can speak audibly, okay? But by and large, that's not how He's going to speak to you, most likely, okay? He can do that, but most likely He's not going to do that. How's He going to speak to you? He's going to speak in your spirit. Because we interact with Him through the Holy Spirit, and so He's going to speak into your spirit. But it takes asking, and it takes getting quiet, and it takes listening. And as we do that, here's what happens. Then you go into the Word, and you begin to read about these different accounts with people who walked with God and knew God. And all of a sudden, you're going to begin to understand what God's trying to do inside of you. You're going to begin to understand, for instance, that life is not about you doing big things for God and impressing people. Life is about you getting to know God. You know, some of us, for instance, you've been on a mission trip. You've gone overseas and it's been a big deal. I mean, you had to sacrifice. You sacrificed a lot of time beforehand, getting ready, raising money. I mean, all the planning. I mean, it's huge. And then you go over there and you're like, all right, we're going to win these souls to God and it's going to be big. And what you find out is that through it, the biggest thing that God did was showed you something about Himself. But it happened because you said yes to the things that God is leading you into. There's an invitation that God has for you. An invitation is something that we hear in the church, and where most of us go, if you've been around the church, is you go, oh, it's the invitation to be saved. Well, saved is part of it, but the whole reason that saved happens, what that means is, it means my sins are washed away, and I'm able to enter into the presence of God so that I can know Him. That's the whole point of it. I don't have my sins washed away so that I can be saved and then just go do life. No. The whole point of heaven is that you would be in God's presence. The point of heaven is not just to get rid of the bad things. The whole reason that the bad things are gone is because we're in the presence of God. But you know what? You can be in the presence of God now. Not fully like we're going to be in heaven. We're still in this world. You can know Him right now. So here's the question. Do you know Him right now, or do you know about Him? Because if you're like me, you grew up around a lot of people who knew about Him, and you thought that's what it was to follow Him. That's what I thought. Because that's what I was raised up around. I was raised up around people who knew about God. And they would go to these Bible studies. And we would sit around and talk about, different things and different theological things and blah, blah, blah. But then when we went out and lived our life, we tried to be good people, but we did what we wanted. That's basically it. We didn't ask God, do I do this? Lord, show me this. We didn't walk around through the day going, God, I need you every moment. God, is there someone you want me to speak to here? We were oblivious to that. You save that. I mean, you don't even save it for Sunday, because Sunday you're going and you're just trying to learn more about God. And it does us no good whatsoever. And what I'm trying to share with you is that, like the religious leaders of Jesus' day, we form opinions about God. They're not even accurate. And there are so many people today that they're writing books about God, and they don't know God. But I want you to know this morning that you can know God. The people who walked with Jesus, they were not the religious leaders. They were not the religious educated. They were the fishermen. They were the worst of sinners, tax collectors. They were not the people that society was impressed with. And they were the people that knew God. They knew Him. And then God used them so that others can know Him. I've come here because God has called me here to know Him, number one. That's the biggest thing He's done in me being here, is to know Him. And I want to give you that invitation. I want to vocalize that invitation to you. I'm not here to win the community. I'm here to share with you so that you can go then share that with others, so that they can see that you know Him. Not that you're perfect or anything like that, but that you know Him, and that they can know Him, and that it changes your life. Are you perfect? No. Spend some time with me. I'm nowhere close to it. But I've been changed. And God continues to rescue me day after day after day. I mean, it's phenomenal. I mean, there's not a week that goes by that I'm not like, God, you've done it again. You've rescued me. I mean, just yesterday, I mean, I was wrestling in my heart with, emotional stuff, and I'm ready to do some stupid stuff that would just ruin my pastorate and everything else. I'm just emotionally, I'm there. And God rescues me. He does it over and over again. All right, the scripture I want to go to is in the Gospel of John, chapter 5. Gospel of John, chapter 5. And through the Gospels, we see Jesus having interactions with these religious people over and over again, because they're so angry at Him because He does not represent the view of God that they've had. And I want you to hear this. If you know God, like if you know Him and you walk with Him, there's going to be a large part of what appears to be the church that is not going to like you. They are not going to like you. They are going to persecute you. That's where the persecution came from for Jesus. It came out of God's people, the people who claim to be following Him. We don't want to be those people. How do we keep from being that? Well, we know God. We walk with Jesus. What does that look like? Well, I want to begin in verse 31. The real place I want to get to is verse 39, but I just want to supply some context here as Jesus is talking to these people. He says to them, "If I were to testify on my own behalf, my testimony would not be valid. But someone else is also testifying about me. And I assure you that everything he says about me is true. In fact, you sent investigators to listen to John the Baptist." That's who he's talking about here. That's the other person that's testifying about him. "And his testimony about me was true. Now, of course, I have no need of human witnesses, but I say these things so you might be saved." This is where he's going. This is what he's after. God desires even the dead religious people to be saved. That's what he desires. He desires them to be saved so that they can know him. But if we simply form our ideas about God out of things we've read or heard from people who claim to know about God but don't actually know God, guess what? We're going to get it wrong. And that's what happened to these people. And so when Jesus showed up on the scene, he's speaking things that their religious leaders are not speaking. And so they're saying, this can't be right. But what I want you to hear is this. You can know God and you can go to His Word and you can understand it. You've heard me stress that before if you've been here very long, and I continue to stress it. You can know God and you can understand His Word. I caution people sometimes to go to too many commentaries because oftentimes it's people who claim to know about God, they don't really know God, and they muddy the water. They throw in so much, well, what about this? Well, what about this? Well, what about that? Yeah, there are all kinds of things we don't know. But you know what? God gives us what we need to know in the Word. Like if you didn't even have anything else to look at besides the Word would be enough. I have come to know more about God and know more about His Word since I have stopped searching so much in extra biblical stuff and just studied the Word. It has become so much clearer to me as I've just read the Word. And God has begun to open up things to me. And oftentimes it happens through the experiences that I go through in life because suddenly I can relate to them and I'm like, I know what they're talking about because I've walked through that. But the guy who's not doing it, he's over here just reading the letter and he's saying, well, it could be this and what about this and we don't know that. And it's just like, it just gets so muddy. It's just like, it makes no sense and everything's all cloudy. But when we just seek God and when we seek His Word, we're able to understand. That's the invitation He gives. He goes on and he says in verse 35, John was like a burning and shining lamp, and you were excited for a while about his message. But I have a greater witness than John, my teachings and my miracles. The Father gave me these works to accomplish, and they prove that He sent me. And the Father who sent me has testified about me Himself. You have never heard His voice or seen His face, and you do not have this message in your hearts because you do not believe me, the one He sent to you. So one of the things that Jesus points to is His teachings and His miracles, the works that He was doing. One of the things that we always want to look at is we want to look at the fruit. Is this God? What is the fruit that is coming about from this? Does it match the Word? Or, even though it sounds accurate, the fruit of it seems to be divisiveness, and the fruit of it doesn't seem to be joy and peace and all of those things. This doesn't seem to really connect with God. That's one of the things that we want to look at. And then we also want to look at, what's coming out of this? Do we see God moving in this? That's one of the things that we want to go to. But they weren't doing that. They were simply saying to themselves, wait a minute, this doesn't match what we've been taught. And then verse 39, here's the central thing that I really want to focus on. He says to them, you search the Scriptures because you think they give you eternal life. But the Scriptures point to me. Yet you refuse to come to me to receive this life. In this Word is truth. But the truth is Jesus. Jesus is the Word. Jesus is the one that all of this points to. And as you walk with Jesus, so much of this is going to make sense. One of the things that comes to my mind is someone once said to me, and I've heard this before, God is so angry in the Old Testament, but then He's so nice in the New Testament. But as you walk with God, what you find is that the Old Testament is full of grace. It's full of love. But what you have is, in the New Testament, you have God in the flesh. And what you have is, you have who God really is. And what you have in the Old Testament is you had a lot of people that misinterpreted who God was. But Jesus shows us who He really is. So if I'm looking at God as being mean in the Old Testament but nice in the New Testament, guess what? I'm misinterpreting Him. Because God is the same yesterday, today, and forever. But the way that you come to know that is you walk with Him. You ask Him things. You follow in obedience. And as you do that, again, we think that sometimes it's all about what we're doing for God, but that's never His primary concern. His primary concern is what He's doing in you. So He's going to call you to serve. And He's going to call you to serve in places that you're not comfortable, that maybe you're not, initially drawn to. And the reason He's going to do that is He's going to do things inside of you so that you come to know Him more, so that you have to rely on Him more. We don't like that. I don't like that. My flesh doesn't like that. I like to be prepared for everything. Some of you, when you go somewhere, you pack light, right? My wife's a light packer. She's one of those that if you get on the plane, she wants to fit the bag in the overhead thing and that be it. I'm the opposite. I want to prepare for everything. And so I bring the big suitcase, okay? I'm the high maintenance one. I check it, I'm not, because I don't want to get there and be missing something. But you know what? As I walk with God, that's not what He does with me. Just like the disciples, He told them, all right, you're going to go on this journey. Don't take anything with you. Just go. I don't like that. That makes me nervous. But you know what? Through it, I see God move. I see God move. And what happens is He becomes real to me. And He's not just somebody I know about. He's somebody that I know. And by the way, part of knowing God is reacting to His discipline and being disciplined by Him. If you're not being disciplined by Him, you don't know Him. Scripture declares that God disciplines those He loves. Okay? So if you're walking with Him, it means you're being disciplined. Don't think that, oh, God hates me or He must not like me because I'm going through this stuff. No. It means He loves you. But the way that you get to know Him is you react to the discipline. Okay? You receive it and you soften yourself and you move towards Him. That's the process. You're His child. But the way that happens is we walk with Him. If we just go and we just try to do Bible studies for the sake of Bible studies, to try to extract knowledge, the knowledge that we extract is going to be wrong. It's going to be wrong. How do we protect ourselves from that? Well, one of the things that we do, and I know you hear me talk about this over and over, it's because we need it. We got to force ourselves into this. We walk in community. That's how we do it. We walk in community. And there's ways for you to keep that from happening. There's ways for you to keep people at a distance. Don't have anyone that you meet with one-on-one and you talk about your faith. Okay, don't do that if you want to keep from knowing God and you just want to know about Him and you want to do your own thing. Make sure you don't do that. Make sure that you don't, get into a small group and talk about life. Make sure you only talk about biblical things and you never apply it to your life, okay? Make sure you do that. That will help you not know God and just, know some things about Him, which you're just forming an idol, and you can go about living your life. When you've got a decision to make, don't ask other people to pray with you. Don't ask them to hear from God for you. That way you get to make whatever decision you want and then say it's God. It works out great. That's how you keep from knowing God. Oh, and by the way, don't serve, okay? Don't look for ways to get in the church family and serve. Because what happens there is you develop relationships, it humbles you, and through that, you get to know God. So if you want to know about God and not know God and just keep a distance, this is the way you do it. Don't have real community. Don't serve. Just kind of kind of keep a distance. Learn some verses so that you can throw them out and some slogans that you can throw out about God so that people are like, oh yeah, that's a Christian, and they follow God. The religious leaders were great at this. We don't have the tassels like they wore, but that was one of the things they had. They wore tassels, and they did all kinds of things to try to convince people that they knew God, but the fact is they didn't. But here's the thing. I don't think you're really like that. I think you're like me, and you struggle with it because your flesh wants control, but in your heart, you really want to know God. And that's why I want to give that invitation. And it's not me giving it, it's the Lord. You can know God this morning. But here's what it takes. It takes a stop pretending. There's a lot of pretending that goes on in the church about knowing God. There's a lot of different ways that you can pretend, You can go out just throwing out knowledge. That's one way to pretend. You can talk about the good things you've done. That's another way to pretend. You can say long, lengthy prayers with a lot of big words in it. That's another way. You can try to exercise what appears like spiritual gifts in front of people with large audiences, words from the Lord, making sure that, everybody knows that you got one. Those are the kind of things that you can do. But you know what? If you want to know God, it means getting rid of all that. It means getting real. It means inviting people to speak into your life. It means speaking into other people's lives. That's another hard thing to do because we want people to like us. As a pastor, it's one of the things that I'm called to do is to speak into people's life, and I hate it. I hate that part of it because I just, if somebody comes to me, I'm all for it. But to pursue somebody, I have such a hard time with that. But what that is really about is my pride. And if I don't step into that, you know what? I'm not going to know God. And there's so many of these scriptures that I'm not going to understand. I'm not going to understand when Paul talks about weeping for people that don't know God. Weeping for people that are falling away from God. Giving his life and suffering beatings and shipwrecks, trying to pursue people so that they would know God. I'm just going to read over those things. And it's not going to affect me whatsoever. It's not going to make any sense. And I'm going to form a view of God and a view of what it is to follow God that is completely different than the Bible, even though I'm reading it continually. The only way that I get to know it is that I step into it. And I start doing the things that God is calling me to, which is the same things he was calling them to. And all of a sudden, those things are going to come to life. And I'm going to understand what they were going through. And instead of condemning guys like Peter, I'm going to be like, I get you. I totally get you. You can know God. That's the invitation this morning. If you've never surrendered yourself, that's the first step. It's confessing that you've been going your own way and saying, I'm done with it. It's wrong because you're God and you decide what's right and wrong. And I want to surrender to you today. And if you're ready to do that and to say, Jesus, I'm ready to make you Lord, the first thing he says is, get baptized. Go down into the water and symbolize that spiritual death and come back new. So if you've never done that, come and talk to me today, okay? I'm not going to make a spectacle out of you, but just come and talk to me and we'll talk about that. I'm not going to put you in front of people, but we'll talk about what to do with that. But if you've made that decision, here's what I know. Today, God's asking something of you because he always is. We are in this constant state of surrendering more and more. And so this morning, what's he asking of you? Because the choice is this. The choice is knowing him or knowing about him. If you want to know him, if you want the word to come to life, you've got to step in and walk out what it says. When you stop doing that, you become the Pharisee, the religious leader. And it's a battle. I get it, okay? But this morning, the choice is yours again. You've made it thousands of times before. The choice is again. What are you going to do this morning? Are you going to step in to whatever he's asking and say yes? I pray that you will.